Welcome to the Authority of Love. I'm your host, Greg Williams, joined again by our wonderful co-host, David Walls of the Family Foundation for another Family Foundation Friday. David, thanks for joining us again. It's always great to have you.
Always good to be with you, Greg.
Well, we never lack for things to say, but before we get into that, how's your week been?
Man, it's been a good week, brother.
Awesome.
So
excellent. Kids back in school yet?
No, our kids are not back
later,
into
right?
school. They go back after Labor Day, but I know a lot of kids across Kentucky are back in school this week or even before. And you know, we sent this out in our weekly prayer devotional. Encourage folks to be praying for all the students going back to school, for teachers, administrators. It's a new school year is exciting, and it's a lot to be praying for.
Yeah, absolutely.
Certainly. So
pray for staff, boards of education, and superintendents, and we'll get into that more a little bit later, right?
And I'm also, Greg, I'm just really excited. We've recently brought on two new team members, and which has just been a huge answer to prayer. I'm so thankful. Nick Spencer has joined us as our director of policy. He's got some pastoral background, as well as working for some partnered nonprofit ministries, and so excited to have him on board. And then Jesse Green joins us as well as our legal and policy advisor. He just graduated from law school at the Ohio State University, as I'm reminded, but also did his undergrad in Asbury, and he's going to be helping us in legal and policy and also in grassroots. And so just a big answer to prayer.
Absolutely.
And we've been hitting the ground running. Jesse and I both spoke this week on the same night, educating folks on the School Choice Amendment 2 that I know we're going to visit about. And we've been doing some different town halls, and so a lot of activity going on as the fall gets here.
So we'll get to that a little bit more later. But seriously, come out to the town halls. You're going to hear a little bit more about that. Come out to the Family Forum on October the 12th. Again, a little more about that later. But you're going to hear about it. But you'll get to meet David and Nick and Jesse and others, and who stand for what you stand for, I hope, and you know what we stand for. So thanks for sharing that with us, David. Tell us a little bit more about this then, because we knew this was going to happen. We didn't know exactly how, but we knew that Amendment 2 was going to be controversial. Shouldn't be, but it is.
Yeah, well, and Greg, some of the news today the news of this week that I've seen covered in the papers across Kentucky relates to something that happened in Pulaski County in the public school system there. And just to remind folks, Amendment 2 is the Educational Opportunities Amendment that's on the November ballot. But what we saw happen in Pulaski County, kind of as they were starting back schools there, was they actually did a coordinated effort. Both my understanding is on Facebook posts for all of their schools, on some of their school websites, maybe even some signs, telling folks to vote no against Amendment 2. Now, what's the problem with that? Well, the problem
because they have free speech, right?
Individually, of course,
as a person,
of course, we have advocated for the free speech, religious liberty rights of teachers, school administrators, absolutely.
Even when we don't agree with their stance.
Absolutely.
They with ours,
but the problem here, Greg, is they're using taxpayer time, resources to advocate against a proposed issue on the ballot, which is in violation of state law.
Right.
It's also in violation of what the school board, their kind of school board association in Kentucky advises them. And so that has caused, obviously, a lot of controversy. There were some legislators that pointed out that this was not right, not legal. And thankfully, our great Attorney General Russell Coleman, he kind of leapt into action, and he put out an advisory opinion sent out reminding all the school districts across Kentucky that it is that local, state, and federal dollars are not allowed to be used to advocate for or against questions that appear on the ballot. Now, we have Amendment 2 on the ballot. There's also a Amendment 1 on the ballot as well, and of course, so it covers any of those issues. But it's and there's been some media back and forth since then. But look, at the end of the day, it's certainly concerning because some of the messaging, and it seems to be the superintendent in that school district has been the one kind of championing this cause and seeing him quoted in a lot of media.
So you can tell who it is. We can talk about who it is because it's out there.
But their messaging was, and we've heard this is straight from Governor Beshear, right? public funds only for public schools, and somehow championing this message that our taxpayer resources at the end of the day should be used to best educate children.
Yes.
It's about
Yes.
educating children.
Yeah.
It's not about funding systems or, so, and you and I have broke some of this down.
Yes.
But what do we have happening here, Greg? We've got, they say public funds for public schools, but they're actually wanting, in this case, to use public funds to take direct political positions on these issues.
And that speaks to the issue.
Right.
If you're willing to take those public dollars in your public setting and break the law,
right.
That's what they've done.
Yeah.
They've broken the law. Maybe they didn't know that, but ignorance is no excuse.
Right.
Anyway, in so doing, it sort of highlights the fact that is a lot of what goes on in public schools. I grew up in them. I've taught in them. I've taught in private schools and public schools. I've been an athletic director, a coach. And these things go on. So the whole idea, and I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, you had that map, and I held it up for those who watch the video podcast. There's like 20 states around us. Every one of them have given choice to their educational system, and everyone has benefited from that, except Kentucky.
Yeah. So again, this is just another reminder why Amendment 2, I will argue is one of the most important things on the ballot. Obviously, we got the presidential election, we got important legislative races, but Amendment 2 is just vitally important. And again, Amendment 2 does not prescribe any particular policy. It really just promotes a principle that says we want to allow our General Assembly, who is elected to legislate and create policy, to be able to create opportunity for school choice policies that will work best for Kentucky families, to say that we want to be able to look at the resources, the considerable resources that we invest in education, and say, let's see how we can invest those resources in the most prudent, effective way possible. Obviously, that's going to continue to mean a tremendous investment in public education. The Constitution requires that.
Yes.
This amendment does nothing with that language in the Constitution. The question is just really, are we going to be able to look at some of the other types of school choice programs in the future that other states have done, whether that's been tax credit scholarships programs, whether there's a variety of different ways. And each state has crafted policy to meet their state.
Right.
As we sit here right now, Kentucky, we can't even have that conversation because the door has been closed.
Yes.
And so the Amendment 2 would simply just allow the General Assembly to provide increased resources for educational opportunities in local communities. I would, again, this amendment doesn't set any policy. If this passed, then we would have a policy debate in the future in Kentucky. But I truly believe that at the end of the day, if Amendment 2 passes, what you're going to see is increased resources across the board.
Yes.
But what we're going to see is an opportunity for those resources to be more targeted, to follow students, to empower families, and ultimately means that we're going to get more bang for our buck for those resources.
And that's the bottom line.
Yeah.
Better educated students that can contribute to society, and we want them to do that. Can I say this? You tell me if I'm right on this or not. Literally, and this is what people are scared of, this, but it offers competition.
Yeah.
It offers competition, and therefore, and competition always raises the level. It doesn't leave anybody out.
Right.
It just means if the public schools do a better job, they get more resources. If other variety of different school systems do a better job, they get more, and they're spread out, and freedom of choice.
Absolutely.
Isn't that the mantra of the other side?
It is, and we have choice in every other arena of life in our, in the culture and modern economy in which we live. Yeah. Sometimes we might even have too much choice. You can, go on Amazon and be like, good night. I don't, how many different.
When I played ball, literally basketball in the Soviet Union, we were standing in a grocery store one time with a teammate of mine, and this elderly couple came down, and there were white boxes with brown and sort of yellow and black ink on them, and they said cornflakes, wheat flakes, rice flakes. That was the only choices. And my teammate was literally just just frustrated with that.
Yeah.
And this couple can understand enough English and said, "You Americans, you have way too many choices, and you know what our cereal aisles look like,
Yeah.
right?" But that's your point,
Right.
It really is. But it's better to have too many than not enough, because if you don't have enough, you usually have control.
Right.
And that's why they are so hard to want to stay on this public education, because they control and manipulate the young minds. If that's what people want, then so be it. If they agree with you, then so be it. But if not, let's give those choices to parents and families and students.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And again, just to remind folks, we've got a educational resource on our website. If you go to kentuckyfamily.org, and you'll see our Amendment 2 page, and we've got some factual resources about what it does, what it doesn't do, and some other FAQs.
Yeah. If you're driving through or in the central Kentucky area, you can grab one of these. I think it's the same thing as on the page,
On the
right?
website, yeah.
But you can get a hard copy or several and pass
Yeah.
them out at your organization or church or whatever if you'd like to do that. Now, we mentioned this. We got a little bit of time. We've talked about the presidential tickets, at least as far as we know. I know the Democratic convention is still coming up, and that finalizes it. But it looks like they're set and they're moving forward. And there's very clear distinction on those. We mentioned that a little bit last week. Talk to us a little bit about this issue of life and where their records clearly show that they stand.
Yeah, look, the issue of life, the issue of abortion is going to be front and center in the presidential race. It's going to be front and center in the context of a lot of legislative races. It's going to be front and center in a number of states that are going to have mainly pro-abortion ballot measures on the ballot. I think this week we now know Missouri is also going to have one on the ballot. So regardless of where you are, the issue of abortion is going to be front and center. And there just continues to be, as folks are digging into and reminding folks of the records of Kamala Harris and Governor Walz, this is the most extreme abortion ticket in the history of the country. I want to repeat that again, and I don't think there's debate about this.
No, there's not.
This is the most extreme abortion ticket in the history of this country. You and I talked a little bit about this last week, Greg, but they have both supported no limits on abortion. They want to impose this now, if elected, advocate across the nation.
Mm-hmm.
And here's one, and you and I touched on this a little bit last week, but they have vigorously opposed giving medical care to babies born alive after attempted abortions. Okay. When Kamala Harris was a senator in California, she twice voted against bipartisan legislation, essentially a Born Alive Infant Protection Act. And as governor, Tim Walz signed legislation repealing their essentially Born Alive Infant Protection Act. Yeah. I want, again, just let that sink in for a minute. A law that simply says that if a preborn child survives,
a baby born alive,
survives.
Right?
I'm talking out of the womb,
right?
Survives, and it happens. I've
Absolutely,
seen testimony.
we know it. Yes, it does.
Minnesota had a law with those protections. He repealed it and wiped away even some reporting requirements so that they would even know that it's going on. That is how extreme that we're talking about. And so I think as we continue to move forward in this election cycle, Christians, we are going to have to think deeply and biblically all the way down the ballot about how in this moment we have got to remind ourselves that voting and taking the issue of life into account when we vote is central to what we're called to do as Christians.
And David, we've talked about this, but the gender dysphoric issues that are mutilating children, all of those, there's clear evidence on all records. Look at the records, not the rhetoric. We say that often. So remember, October 12th is the Kentucky Family Forum. Get signed up for that. Tables and registration are open at familyforum.org or KentuckyFamily.org. I'm Greg Williams with David Walz.